Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. Tomorrow, on Monday, 20 Israeli hostages are expected to return home and to their families alive. It will be a moment of deep relief for Israel. We will see families reunited, please God. A nation will finally be able to exhale after months, 2 years of unbearable waiting. And also it will be a turning point, because the return of the hostages doesn't just mean the end of captivity, it is also the end of this war. But as the guns fall silent, new questions arise. What comes next for Gaza, for Israel, and for the entire region? What kind of political reckoning now awaits Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government? How will Israel navigate the complex new map being drawn around it? It includes the summit that Donald Trump will be participating in tomorrow in Egypt, growing U.S. involvement, and of course, Trump's own visit, very short, to Israel to meet with some hostages and to speak before the Knesset. To unpack all of this, I sat down with two of Israel's most insightful thinkers and JPPI senior fellows, Shmuel Rosner and Gil Troy. Together, we looked at the meaning of this moment, the moral and political cost of the war, the challenge of what some are already calling the day after, and the test of leadership that lies ahead for Israel and its political class. The episode focuses on transition from war to something else. What is this something else? Is it going to be peace, paralysis, maybe another round of conflict in the future? That will depend largely on the decisions that are going to be made in the days and weeks to come. Stay with me. Gil and Shmuel, it's great to have you both back on the podcast. It's been a while since we've caught up with everything going on, and there's probably it's difficult to even articulate and I think express what we're about to face over the next 24 to 48 hours. We're talking midday Sunday, and on Monday morning, it could be by the time Donald Trump lands here in Israel at about 9:20 a.m., they say. It could be already by then the hostages will have been released. We still don't know the exact timeline, but I just saw a report recently of a couple hours ago of a senior Hamas member talking about how early Monday morning in the pre-dawn hours, they're already going to start releasing the hostages, and it could be by the time Trump lands, those 20 living hostages will hopefully have been reunited with their families and returned to the state of Israel after 2 years. So I was thinking kind of how to frame this conversation, and I think maybe the best question to ask the two of you, is the war over? And Shmuel, why don't we start with you?
Yes, I think the war is over. The hostages hopefully will come back, and when they do, it's pretty clear that Israel in some way is losing its best argument for continuing the war, at least its best argument when it speaks to the world. Up until now, Israel could tell the world, we cannot stop the war and leave our hostages behind. Now when the hostages are back, Israel can no longer say such things. So what remains are the geostrategic issues. And on this, I will say the following. In the next 48 hours, we have two big events. The one that is more important for the short term is the release of the hostages. It will be very dramatic. It will be a very emotional. Its impact on the way we feel is going to be very dramatic. So we are going to focus mostly on the release of hostages, their return home, their ability to recover, etc. But then we're going to have a summit in Cairo, and for the long term, the summit in Cairo is probably more important than the release of the hostages. This will be the place in which, the future will be determined. Because Gaza, Gaza is not solved. The issue is not solved. The hostages are back. That's great. We still don't know who's going to rule Gaza, what type of government is going to be there, how the reconstruction of Gaza is going to take place, under whom, whose jurisdiction it is going to be under. So there are many, many open questions that will be talked about and possibly resolved in Cairo. And I would suggest to all of us to get excited and emotional with the release of the hostages, but keep an eye on the Cairo summit. It's no less important.
Gil, what are your thoughts?
In the U.S., they talk about forever wars, but they weren't really. And unfortunately, here in Israel, we've been stuck in a forever war. Now, I should say, I always like to say that I call the Arab-Israeli conflict the Arab-Israeli conflicts, and I add an S, because we eliminated the conflict with Egypt, more or less, and with Jordan, and with the UAE. So there's been progress. But certainly with the Palestinians, this is a long-term game. Still, I want to take a step back and say we won. That it's really quite extraordinary. If indeed the 20 hostages come home, Hamas has lost its last card over us in many ways. Hamas has been severely degraded. If we look at my cousin on Kibbutz Neirim and all the wonderful people who live on in the Gaza corridor, they're much, much safer than they were October 6th. If we go up north, they're much, much safer than they were October 6th. If we look at the situation with Iran, we're all, and I say we, including the entire Western world, are much, much safer than we were October 6th. So there have been extraordinary gains. Now, Israel has a tendency sometimes to win on the battlefield and lose diplomatically, and I think that's what Shmuel is warning us about. So I'm well aware of the challenges ahead, but I also think it's very important for us to take a step and say, you know what, we've been through a very, very difficult, grinding 2 years. It took the United States 9 years in Iraq, 20 years in Afghanistan to get much less dramatic results. And so this is also a moment as we embrace the hostages and their families, as we also anticipate that there are going to be 3, 4, 5, who knows, and I hate to just throw out people as numbers, bodies that are never recovered. And it's very important, I think, that we as a society don't get overly involved and just understand that we've lost so many in this war that we need to figure out a way to mourn, but also move on. So I'm not minimizing the losses. I'm not minimizing the challenges. But I also want to say not only that Israel won, but that the United States of America won. The United States of America, had Israel lost on October 7th, God forbid, had Israel not been so effective against Iran, against Hezbollah, against Hamas, America would have been much weaker. And you, Yaakov, you're the military expert among us. Look at all the American military weaponry, the American military maneuvering, the strategies that we have used and that we have improved on. And so the United States of America is much stronger, let alone we now have a President, Donald Trump, who's enjoying a diplomatic victory. So challenges, but also a lot of upside.
Well, I mean, look, I agree with both of you. Tomorrow, hopefully, when we do see these hostages leaving Gaza.
I don't agree with both of us.
No.
I only agree with myself.
Well, I want to agree with parts of what both of you said. I think that there is a victory, and the victory is getting the people home. And for me, and I know for a lot of us, that has always long been the main objective of what or the first priority of the objectives that we needed to achieve. The problem is that I think, and this might be a case of built up expectations and falling short on being able to deliver those expectations. But we did have a prime minister and a government that for the last 2 years was throwing out slogans of total victory and we're going to eliminate Hamas and we're going to defeat Hamas. And as Shmuel was referring to what's going to happen in this summit that takes place in Cairo, that, by the way, the Israelis are not invited to, which is a whole separate question, which we're not a player in this region. I mean, we weren't decided to the conflict, but I put that aside for a moment. The devil here is going to be in the details. We have an agreement on phase one. We pull back, we stop the war, we get back the hostages, hopefully also as many of the bodies that can be recovered and brought home for burial. But at the end, I mean, we just saw, and we got a taste of what's coming next with Hamas deploying on the streets of Gaza just yesterday. Thousands of masked men, those baseball hats, AK-47s, shooting suspected collaborators on the streets, locking down and clashing already with some of those militias that Israel had been cooperating they had been cooperating with Israel throughout the war, starting to crack down on them, Israel not coming to the rescue when in the past Israeli Air Force jets were able to be part of that. I mean, so like when we start to hear about the ISF, the International Security Force, or the new government that's coming, or the Peace Board led by Tony Blair, I mean, somebody here is going to have to contend and confront Hamas, which is still there, right? So the prime minister who had promised this type of elimination and victory and Hamas gone, not exactly the case. And I just don't see how Israel is going to exactly renew the fighting even though that's what some people on the right and part of the government are saying, well, if Hamas doesn't disarm, we have the ability, we reserve the rights, et cetera, et cetera. Donald Trump's not there. So what I want to ask both of you is, Trump has really framed this as the Trump accomplishment, the achievement. Last night at the Hostage Square, when you had Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, it's Trump's show. Trump is coming here for what? I think 4 hours on the ground in Israel. Not even, right? He's landing at 9:20, quick ceremony at Ben Gurion, dashing to the Knesset, speaking, meeting hostages, back to Ben Gurion, off to Cairo, right? So, but he's coming here less, I think, for the speech in the Knesset, more to frame this as, guys, this is me. I did this. I brought this. It's my deal. But that's at the high level. Now we got to drill down. Is he going to be there with us to drill down, Shmuel?
I'm not so sure that he will. Again, I said I agree with myself. About the victory, is this a victory? I'm not so sure it is. I think it's, first of all, it's premature to say that it's victory. If in 3 months or half a year or a year from now, the war will be renewed, then it's not a victory. Mm-hmm. And also, in victory, there are at least two aspects that we must consider. One is the psychological aspect, and I don't think it feels like victory. Mm-hmm. I don't think Israelis are elated because they feel that Israel won the war. They are elated because they won the hostages back. They are very happy to see those of them who are still alive coming back to their families. But I don't think that they feel as they felt after the 6 Days War. They feel more like they felt after the 1973, the Yom Kippur War. It doesn't feel like victory. The other aspect of victory is it's the long-term arrangement in Gaza, and it's all in the future. As you said, the devil is in the details. I'm not so sure that Hamas is defeated. I'm not sure it's going to be disarmed. I'm not sure it's not going to make trouble again. It's true that there were great achievements in the war. I'm not trying to diminish or disregard these achievements. Certainly the fight against Hezbollah was very successful and will have long-term impact. The battle against Iran is more complicated. Then again, the operation itself was certainly a success. But as for Gaza, Gaza is in ruins, but does it cease to be a problem for Israel? I don't think we can say with confidence that Gaza is no longer a problem for Israel.
And I think, by the way, we're far from that. I mean, listening to some of the pro-government people and members of the government talk about this victory and the success and this deal and how Netanyahu pulled off a rabbit out of his hat, et cetera. I mean, it kind of was reminiscing to me. I was reminded of some of those declarations that were made after Guardian of the Walls operation back in 2021, when also then it was a victory, 5 years of quiet, et cetera. And we saw just how quickly, unfortunately, I hate to laugh at these things, but it's so troubling, how quickly that disappeared and the surprise that came at us just less than 2 years later. Gil, I do want to ask, though, you saw what happened last night at the Hostage Square, right? You had Steve Witkoff trying to give his speech and thinking, he mentions Donald Trump, place breaks out in applause and cheers, people, yelling, thank you, Trump, celebrating, waving American flags. And then he mentions Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's name and the boos starts. And my heart almost goes out to Steve Witkoff because he just didn't know how to reply. He was like, "Oh, okay, let me finish my thought, guys." He says, just let me finish the line. But obviously, Hostage Square,
the name Netanyahu again, which triggered more,
right? Even more boos.
I mean, to the script.
I think we can all recognize that Netanyahu does deserve some credit, right? He accepted the deal. He helped, architect the deal, but there's definitely a feeling here in Israel that Netanyahu had to have both arms twisted to be brought into this deal, and that without Trump, this would not have happened. How do you see this?
I'm going to get to victory in a second, but let's go through. First of all, it reminds me of the classic story where when Bill Clinton and Bibi Netanyahu were yelling and screaming, as they often did, and this time they were in Jerusalem, And Bill Clinton looked at Bibi and said, Bibi, if I go out there and I run for prime minister, I'm going to win and you're going to lose. And so it's sometimes easier to love the president from afar who comes in and swoops down as some kind of superhero. And that's the role that Trump loves to play. And that's the role that in some ways Trump has played at this moment. And, you know, Trump has what I call sledgehammer leadership. It's a sledgehammer presidency. Boom. Get the hostages out. Get the big thing. Come in for my 3-hour and 40-minute photo op. But the slivers go flying, and you sometimes don't know where they're going to end up. What was dismaying to me about that moment in Hostage Square is that I've been, for 2 years, and by the way, I think there's a moment to salute you, Yaakov. You've done an extraordinary job in this podcast, shepherding this conversation and leading so many people into real understanding, but also empathy and comfort during these very difficult 2 years. And for 2 years, we've been talking about the fact that Netanyahu has not shown grace, has not united the country, has not done it, has not been cautious in his language. But shouldn't the opposition also have shown some grace? Wasn't this a moment to actually applaud not just Bibi Netanyahu and Ron Dermer? Wasn't it a moment to say, I don't know, you know, 2 years ago, I believe that we'd get 150 or 200 hostages home. So just sit with the complexity. I wish that Bibi Netanyahu would get up and say, I'm not going to push the judicial reform until there's a next election and I have a mandate for that, and that the opposition would go to the movies on Saturday night and go to the theater on Saturday night and take a break. Because I think we need to kind of stop and breathe and have a little bit of unity and have some grace. That's part one. Part two, Trump has his big photo op. But I agree with you, Shmuel, in that there is a big question about what's going to happen going down. And while Gaza will continue to be a problem for Israel, I think the key word we have to use is threat. And the thing, if we go back 2 years ago to October 12th, 13th, 14th, that awful week and a half afterwards, before Joe Biden even came to visit, what we most needed to restore, and it's not a nice phrase, but we needed to restore the balance of terror. We needed to restore deterrence. And when I look at the seven-front war, we have restored that balance. That, to me, is a victory, even though I'm a historian, and I usually take 10, 20, 30 years before I start using words like victory. But I think it's important for us to say, and again, we go back a year ago or 13 months ago, the fear that we had of Hezbollah. We look at October 6th and how paralyzed we were in terms of dealing with Iran. So I think we have a tendency sometimes to keep on worrying, A, about our losses, which of course are devastating, and B, about the day after. But it's important sometimes to kind of stop and say, you know what? In these 2 years, we have done far better. Look, if we go back to our conversations of November 2023, we were sure that thousands of Israeli soldiers were going to be killed in a necessary invasion of Gaza. And while it breaks my heart, under 500 have died. And again, I hate throwing these numbers around, but, you know, American military people talk to me and go, this is mind-blowing. And so I just want to have a balance of the good and not put it in the context of pro-government or anti-government.
I think there is, again,
pro-Israel and anti-Israel.
There is balance, and I agree with you. I'm also not a fan of the booze, and I think that none of this is ever black and white, right? And if Netanyahu didn't want the deal, he would have stood up and said, I'm not willing to accept this deal, even with the pressure from Trump, although that would have been very hard to oppose the president, especially with Israel's current diplomatic isolation. I mean, we don't have any friends out there except for one right now, and that is Donald Trump. You don't want to lose the one friend that you have. But I do look at one of the problems, kind of the way I see it at least, is this is the government of October 7th, right? Now, the government of October 7th that set the policies that led to this disaster, and you can't just wash that away, is the government that also, we went into a war that lasted 2 years, our longest war. We're now getting the hostages out. And I think the real big question for me is on the one hand, okay, what will be after in Gaza is super important. I don't want to see the war renewed, and I hope that this international mechanism, because, you know, all of us have been around the block a few times with these stories, and I definitely have covered them as a reporter over the years. And I remember back in 06, you know, 05, I covered the disengagement and how it was all going to be different. And then after the first Operation 06 and 08, 09, there was that, after Cass led, there was this whole international mechanism that Tzipi Livni and Ehud Olmert put together that didn't do anything. I mean, every war brought the international mechanism. And I just hope that this one actually, you need patience and you need attention and it needs constant investment. And to think that just the Qatari cash again is what's going to solve our problems, it's not. And that's where I just get a little nervous. So I kind of, I'll take the win now, but I'll get nervous tomorrow. But here's the question I want to ask you, Shmuel. Set aside the military, diplomatic challenges that we're definitely going to face many of over the next years, right? And hopefully they'll be quiet years. But internally inside Israel, right, with the war now, let's say officially over to some extent, what happens? What's the conversation? What happens at Hostage Square? What happens to that movement? What happens to the prime minister? He has refused to establish a commission of inquiry. Is because the war was going on. Now the war is over. Are we going to an election? Are we not going to an election? Is there a chance that he steps down? Gil spoke about grace. Is there a chance that he steps down in grace? Says, listen, I won. I brought home the people. It's time to let the Israeli people have a reset. I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, I can't tell you what's in Netanyahu's heart. If I had to bet, I don't think he's already willing to depart willingly and gracefully from the stage. So I assume he's running again in the next election. As you said, the government lost its main card or main argument for two things. Argument number one, we can't establish a committee of investigation because the war is still ongoing. Well, now is the time. You can do that. Argument number two, we can't go to new election because you don't change leadership in the middle of a war. Again, they lost this card. So by and large, what you'd expect is the coming month to be the month in which we are going to establish this committee and we are going to have new election. Now, as for the new election, that's fairly clear. You know, if it's not now, it's going to be at the latest next September, October. So 2026 is an election year, and all the parties, all the movements, all the leaders, they're already gearing up towards an election year. If it's coming sooner or slightly later, it doesn't much matter. It can be as soon as next February or March, and maybe it'll be somewhat later. I'm not sure it really matters. The whole political sphere is going to deal with the year of election. And as for the committee, I assume that this government does not want to establish a really investigating committee, and that's why we will have to wait for election first and committee next, assuming that a new coalition will have the majority to form such committee. Just 2 days ago, I heard from a fairly senior politician an interesting scenario. He said, let's assume the opposition doesn't win the 60 necessary seats to establish a new coalition without the Arab parties. He said they can still establish a minority government supported from the outside by the Arab parties to do just two things. Remove Bibi from his seat as prime minister and appoint someone else for the interim period until the next election, and appoint an investigative committee. They will say, we are just passing these two, we are just removing the prime minister, establishing a committee, and then moving to the next election. This they might be able to pull out with a minority coalition supported from the outside by the Arab parties. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but it's an interesting thought.
Well, I mean, I will just say that, about the Commission of Inquiry, I totally agree. This government's not going to do it, even now that the war is over, for one very simple reason. They know what the Commission of Inquiry will discover. And they know, I mean, the documentation just on one thing that we all know about, like, for example, the suitcases of Qatari cash that went into Gaza. I mean, it's all well documented. And Netanyahu won't want that to be investigated. He's never established a state commission of inquiry as prime minister in any of his terms in office, and there's no reason he's going to want to do that now. But I hope that a new government will be able to do that. It'll be interesting to see, your theory about that and what that politician told you, because if you talk to the Netanyahu people and members of Likud, they talk about 50 as the magic number that they have to get to with their partners, the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, and Smotrich and Ben Gvir, if Smotrich crosses the threshold, because then with the Arabs, you can deny the other side a coalition. We roll to another government. Although I wonder, and maybe this is something that we need to think about, Gil, also, is it time for, and you mentioned the opposition before, is it time for the opposition to start to speak a little differently? And I, the opposition has been very weak. And, the other day there was a meeting, I think, of Lapid and Lieberman and Yair Golan. They couldn't even agree on a photo, right? They couldn't even put out a photo of them together. So how do we expect these people to get together to do anything to oust the current government? But maybe it's time to end the boycott. It's time to stop with the "we will never sit with Bibi" language. And if there is an election and Bibi does come out on top, which polls do show that he's going to be the biggest party already now, and who knows what will happen over the next months, if not a year of a campaign, it's enough. We don't want, in other words, maybe we don't want Bibi, but we definitely don't want Bibi, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and the ultra-Orthodox. And the majority of this country is Bibi, whatever the Bennett party is, the Lapid, the Gantz, the Lieberman, and maybe the Gadi Eisenkot, and Yair Golan for that matter. That's the majority of the Israelis who serve, who work, who are fighting in Gaza, who are in reserves. Of course, also Smotrich and Ben Gvir's supporters are as well, and voters, 100%. And the religious party voters and religious Zionists have paid a huge price in this war. But if we want real change, it's got to come from that huge tent of the center left, center right, center all put together. Maybe it's time to end the boycott.
Before you end the boycott, you have to end the condescension. You have to end the speaking to yourself constantly. You have to end the constant patting yourself on the back about how wonderful you are and how awful the other people are. Look at the tribalism of, I'm sorry to say, much of the hostage protests. Look at the degree to which, when I have looked at the films, how it's a bunch of old, white, Ashkenazi, cranky men and women. And if they want to win, they have to start talking differently. They have to start saying to Yair Golan, get up and apologize for the awful things you said about our soldiers, or maybe quit. I know that he's polling at 10 seats because that kind of power and that kind of wasach and that kind of makizmo works for a certain group of Israelis. But if we really want to change the tone, we can't just point fingers at Bibi. And my plea for grace is a plea, not a prediction. But we also have to say the opposition has done such a good job. I mean, those boos were, I heard like ding, 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 the opening round of the Bibi Netanyahu re-election campaign. And I know what it does. I see what it does to my Mizrahi friends. I see what it does to my pro-Bibi friends. And go to Netivot, go to the north, speak to people who felt really betrayed by Netanyahu in October, November, December of 2023. Start a conversation with them. Show some respect. If they spent less time demonstrating on Saturday nights, just talking to themselves and blocking traffic and driving my kids crazy, and more time reaching out to potential allies, they might get somewhere. So I think it's very easy to always say what the other guys should do. I think it's really important for all of us to look in and learn, as I've said this before, from our reservists. But I also want to go back to victory on one level and where my historian had two moments. One, in October 1973, this country was devastated, bleeding, burying 2,700 people, sure that we had lost our pride, our power, and no serious Arab army, Egypt, Syria, ever attacked us again. After the second intifada, and I don't even like to use that word because that's their word, of the noble uprising, the shaking off. I wrote a column, this was early in my Zionist writing career, saying, where's the victory parade? And everybody said, you're crazy, look how many people we've lost. But one, as we'll see with Gaza, the action went off camera, and the New York Times followed it less, even though night after night we kept on going in. But also, we changed the conversation. But we were so stuck in our despair. Now, when I look at the days of the Second Intifada, I learned from two things. One, we bounced back in an extraordinary way. Now, obviously, we didn't solve the problem, but we had certain successes, and we had a chance to breathe. And so all I'm saying, with all the complexity, is let's just breathe. Let's take some perspective. Let's look at some of the gains, appreciate some of the gains, appreciate the fact that, as you were pointing out, those gains come from the right and the left, from the Zionist majority that showed tremendous grit and idealism and heroism and altruism and does it every day. Every mother and father and brother and sister and spouse who's mourning and child who's mourning shows tremendous heroism every single day. We owe it to them to change the tone in our country. We owe it to them to have the opposition and the leadership do what they were sort of doing during the time of penitence and saying how we have sinned, and actually start changing the tone. And if it doesn't come from the leaders, let's let it come from the reservists. Let's let it come from the bottom. And again, a plea, not a prediction.
And I'll take that, but I also think where we have to be just careful here is not to fall back into another conceptia, like another fairy tale of sorts that we tell ourselves to, because we do have this tendency to bounce back 100%. I look at it always as being a strength, but I've come to learn that it's also a weakness, because what it does is you're desiring, there's no one more with the desire to live and live well than the Israelis, and to want to live and enjoy life and once again travel. And there's talk of Turkish Airlines coming back. I mean, who would have imagined? So all of this together, and that's just one stupid example, but all of this together is it could make us, God forbid, turn once again a blind eye to what is happening right under our noses. And that is something that I want to be sure that we don't do. And for that reason, by the way, Commission of Inquiry, in my view, is so existential, because you both mentioned the Yom Kippur War. The Agregat Commission of the Yom Kippur War was established literally several weeks after the war ended. In November of 73, it was already established. And Golda Meir went on to win the election, and that's fine, right? That's why I say go to election. Re-elect.
Yeah, she won the election, but right afterwards was
100%
pushed out because of the
because of the war and because of the commission's findings. Well, no, but in other words, she went back to the voter. The voter said what they wanted to. We should do the same. Give the Israeli people the opportunity to once again decide what they want to do. And I think that here is this journey that we have ahead. I fear that we are, we've paid an ultimate price, and I'm worried about what we're going to do to ourselves once again, because the political knives are already being pulled out. They're already being sharpened, and there's no one better than us Israelis to know how to fight that way. I mean, is there something that we can do, Shmuel, to avoid that, to avoid being ripped once again apart?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on the outcome of the election, and I can tell you that I'm not sure we are doing a very good job in reading into the minds of the voters right now. As you know, I follow the polls, I read all of them, I aggregate them. There is a possibility that all of us get it all wrong, that there might be something within the Israeli society that will only reveal itself on election day, and maybe we'll find ourselves hugely surprised by the outcome of the election. I think it's up to the people. Ultimately, you cannot decide for the country what it wants to be. I think Israelis are all tired of the polarization and the bickering. The problem is that each side is blaming the other side for the polarization and the bickering, and each side believes that its own conduct is the right way to go, and the other side's conduct is what causes all the damage. Can we find a way to overcome this and establish something that is more consensual? That's my hope for election day and for after the election. I don't think between now and election day, there's much chance for achieving such thing. What we see now is already the battle for the narrative that will be the main issue for the election. Did we win? Did we lose? That's not only a question that we ask ourselves because we want to show Hamas our way of thinking, or because we want to boost our own morale. It's also the beginning of a political battle between those who say, look how great we did, you need to re-elect us. We were the only ones, with the ability to lead Israel through such hard times. And on the other side, you'll see the people who say, well, this is not such great achievement. We should blame you for the war. And we also blame you for the outcome of the war, which is not as great as you claim it to be.
Well, I'll end with what we started with, which is we don't know if this war will be a victory. We don't know how it will be perceived and how it will be remembered and what will happen. But here's one thing that we hopefully will see tomorrow, and that is watching Matan Angrest, Gali and Ziv Berman, Elkanah Buchput, Ram Braslavsky, Nimrod Cohen, Ariel and David Kanio, Evyatar David, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Maxime Herkin, Eitan Horn, Segev Kalfon, Bar Kuperstein, Omri Miran, Eitan Moore, Yosef Chaim Ochana, Alon Ohel, Avinatan Or, and Matan Zankaker walk out of the tunnels of Gaza and return home to their country, but most importantly to their families who have been waiting for them and fighting for them for 738 days. 2 years and a week almost, 2 years and 8 days. And on the eve of Simchat Torah, on the Jewish calendar, when they were taken 2 years ago. So I think we'll all of us, I know, us three and another 10 million people in this country will be glued to those TV screens, watching and clinging to those images of watching those men return home after something that has just been too long. So on that note, we'll all be able to breathe a little easier tomorrow and smile with a little bigger, a little wider of a smile tomorrow, and really celebrate something of a Simchat Torah the next day. So in that, let me thank both of you, Gil and Shmuel, for being with me, and to all our viewers and listeners. I'm sure you'll all be watching as well. And let's hope, because we still got a bit of time till they come home, just a little longer. Bezrat Hashem, please God, everything will go smooth. And at least this chapter in this very difficult ordeal will finally be behind us. So thank you for joining us. You can find us, as always, where podcasts can be found: Apple, Spotify. Give us a 5-star ranking, YouTube, and the website of Times of Israel. And we'll be back again in a few days with another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI.
And let us say